Shyam Benegal's work on television is as immense as in films. His epic Bharat Ek Khoj, based on Jawaharlal Nehru's discovery of India, is not only a milestone in the history of Indian television, but also shows his grasp and command over television medium. In our concluding episode of the trilogy Triumph on Television, we are going to learn about Shyam Benegal's work on television and hear his reflections on the nature of television and cinema and understand his thoughts on the changing media scenario. Talking to him is a noted poet and artist, Dilip Chitre.
Bhumika, Kondura and Mandi. Now, these three, to my mind, are your most successful films. In many ways, they bring out the best in you as a filmmaker. Of course, I'm not dealing with the later films now, like this epic thing, the making of Mahatma that you made recently. And you have now gone into perhaps an in-between form, which is somewhere between cinema and the television medium. You know, something which is, and perhaps Bharat Ek Khoj was something which probably gave you an insight into television as a medium of a different kind, and you're trying to combine the two. Because I thought that films like Mammo or various other things made beautiful sense as television films. And they were not cinema films. One could see that, you were shifting from one genre to another.
You see, I did television work even before I made my first feature film. When I was on the Homi Bhabha Fellowship, I had already done television work in America.
Yeah.
And when I came back, between two films, between Ankur and Charandas Chor, I did about 29 learning modules for children.
For television.
Learning programs,
yeah.
Yes, for television. It was designed for a site program, satellite television program that we had the
ISRO program from in Ahmedabad.
Yes, when we had the use of that American satellite, and so its footprint was in several regions in India, and so I was in Chhattisgarh doing that. I did it in Chhattisgarh, so I had enough experience of television. So when I actually went into television production, particularly the first one that I did, which was a series of short stories, and then later a serial called Yatra, of the two of the longest
railway
train journeys
that
you could take in India.
Yeah, I've seen that, yes, of course.
Yes.
As a son-in-law of the Indian Railways, you were the best director of the film. Anyway, in many senses of the term.
Right.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed doing that. And then I got the idea of using, working in limited time schemes, but also it made me aware of what the limitations of television were vis-a-vis the cinema, and what the advantages of television were vis-a-vis the cinema. The two of the most important ones, of course, was that since television lacks the depth you get in a large movie image, everything has to be upfront. So in some ways, television becomes like a magazine article to a novel.
Well, excuse me, Shyam, but when I was watching this film Mammo, for example, most of the filming range is from extreme close-up to say a mid-shot. And so it's very, very television kind of, short conception.
Yes, no, I understand. That's what I'm trying to say. So this was the thing. So it made me aware of these things about television, perception with television and perception with the cinema. And television also has yet another thing that happens to one, which is that your attention span gets shortened.
That's right.
And you don't necessarily pay as much attention to television as you pay to the cinema. Yet the influence of television on one is much greater than that of the cinema.
That's right.
So you have so many things, there are many, many aspects to it. And then one starts to become more and more aware of these things. And therefore, when I did make Mammo, which was a small film, was in many ways, although it was designed as a cinema film, its effectiveness on television was greater than it was in the cinema. Unlike, say, Suraj Ka Satwaं Ghoda. Suraj Ka Satwaं Ghoda, the effectiveness of it was much greater when you saw it on the big screen rather than on television, because it was too dense.
That's right.
For television. But it was good for cinema. Well, Mammo was perfect for television screening.
That's right.
But then you become aware and you consciously, when you're working for television, you know that you're working for the smaller screen. You also know for the kind of attention span of the audience you're making it.
Yeah.
So, you become, it mentally, it may not be very consciously done, but you change the mode in your own mind,
And the scale.
And the scale. You change the scale, so many things you do. And which of course was very interesting, because when I did Bharat Ek Khoj, I attempted to do what to this day happens to be the most complete history of India on television, which was Bharat Ek Khoj. Now, when I did Bharat Ek Khoj, I was absolutely aware that this was really for television. Yet I shot it on film. I didn't shoot it on tape. I shot that on 35mm film. And shot it, but for purposes of showing on television. So even Bharat Ek Khoj, although we go through this great range of history, I had to solve a very important problem, which was, when we always think in terms of the past, one of the things that we always do is that we reconstruct our past always in epic terms. There is a natural process that takes place within us. When we deal with in the past, we are always thinking of it in epic terminology. Now, I had to look at it from so many different ways. One had to look at not only what one traditionally calls history, which is a history of regimes and changes that are taking place on the macro levels of history, but also on other levels. Alternate histories, for instance. That is one aspect. Then there was the history of so many other things. The history of the evolution of cultures, the history of the evolution of architecture, the history of the evolution of costuming, of music, all sorts of things, literature. So one had to touch on a lot of these things as well, and then compact it and put it into the box.
Right.
You see, so these were some of the interesting challenges which allowed me to understand the nature of television even more than I already knew.
But you were predominantly dealing with television as a kind of educational medium.
Of course.
Because Bharat Ek Khoj is, I think, the best example in the last 50 years of educational television, and where you see the whole history of India in many different ways. To metaphorically state it, I would say you're panning over something like 3,000 years or 5,000 years of time, and then during this long pan you have intercuts which are extreme close-ups, which give you an individual point of view, and then there are so there's this kind of multiple point of view presentation on the small screen of a very, very complex civilization's history.
Yes.
And so I think it's a brilliant effort, and
Yeah.
only one of a kind. Nobody has attempted anything like that.
Well, the main point, of course, was what was interesting to me is to arrive. If I were to deal with Bharat Ek Khoj on a very personal level, for me it was how this kind of history has created us. When I say us also, I too am a result of that.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really a process of trying to create what one might call the profile of this very elusive character, the Indian.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard to define who an Indian is. And it's really the sum total
Yeah.
of Indian experience that makes for an Indian. And which, of course, was what Nehru was trying to do, because he was actually trying to not only define an Indian, but he was also trying to define the nation of India in that book. And which I think has had a general consensus,
Yeah.
you know, and what one might call a general national consensus, except for very recently, of course. This consensus is not necessarily accepted by some sections of the Indian population. But but to me, that was a very interesting process. Doing that was something of a great learning experience for me. And it also told me that television, because you know, for a long time, I was a great votary for television's use in India for education as the primary purpose of television. This has been something that I have seriously believed in for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And of course, the way television moved, you know, the whole pattern, because the Indian television was defined, brought in, and had very definite purpose, which was to educate, inform, and entertain. And now it's been turned on its head.
Yeah.
So today you are talking of entertaining people and then informing them, and finally perhaps you might educate them as a result of all this. Now this is a very interesting turnabout that has taken place in television, but it has also created many interesting challenges which I am looking forward to trying to work towards, which is that since even news on television becomes entertainment, you know, I mean, you may have well noticed that recently when Clinton decided to bomb Iraq, one of the things was that those 4 nights of bombing that took place, a very interesting thing happened. I caught myself the second evening, because you know, 6 o'clock Baghdad time is 8:30 our time at night.
Yeah.
That is when the sirens would go off in Iraq.
That's right.
So I would come rushing home to be on time, put the thing on at 8:30, CNN or BBC, to watch the cruise missiles getting into Iraq. And then I caught myself saying, what am I doing? You know, how we have converted what is really news into entertainment of this kind when millions are suffering somewhere else, and we are making it a spectator sport for ourselves.
It's
It
like
was
a
watching a cricket match.
Romans spectators.
Exactly, but on a much larger scale.
Yes.
On a scale of a genocide, you know. I mean, it's terrible. So, since television has this ability to convert everything into entertainment, then perhaps we need to go through entertainment, use entertainment as a means to educate. And you know, so this is a very important and challenge today, because unless you do that, you are not going to get to your audiences. And the same thing, it also has something to do with the cinema, because if I have learned anything in the last 25, 26 years of filmmaking, feature filmmaking, it is that, you see, unless you can engage the audience, there's no way you can get to them. And there is primacy to engaging your audience. And it need not be done by formulaic means. You can do it in many different ways. I've always believed that the best teacher is the one who's been the most entertaining to you.
Yeah.
When you went to school. You know, the teacher that you enjoyed learning from was a person who held you.
But of course, you are not offering a narrow definition of entertainment.
Not at all.
Not reducing it to comedy.
Yes.
I hope. I mean.
Not at all. No. You see, I have again been a great votary of saying that entertainment cannot be narrowed down to just getting people to laugh or purely something that you get the audience on a purely sensory level. You see, because entertainment must engage all your faculties, your senses as well as your emotion as well as your mind, conscious mind. Not when your mind goes to sleep. Because, most people tend to define entertainment, certainly people in the entertainment business tend to define entertainment where they automatically assume that putting your mind to sleep is an essential part of entertainment. There is a certain narrowing down of that definition of entertainment.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to
Expand it.
Bring everything into it.
Yeah.
It's like, solving a mathematical problem can be exciting and entertaining. Similarly, a lot of things can be exciting and entertaining. Now, to look at the entertainment involved, inherent in anything, in any educational area, is what I think I should be about in the future.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellently summed up.
This brings an end to our trilogy on noted filmmaker Shyam Benegal. We presented in our 3 episodes Making of the Director, Cinema of Shyam Benegal, and Triumph on Television. We are sure you have gained an insight into the glorious career of this legendary filmmaker and enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed presenting it to you. Thank you for being with us, and goodbye.